Hey, today's topic is going to be about who I think the best macro player of SC2 history is, and I think there's only two choices. There, first is Maru. Maru, for those who don't know, is one of the all-time great StarCraft 2 players. He's a player who won the OSL and a player who's gone to the top four of multiple GSLs in individual tournaments, and was for a time the ace player of Jin Air when Pro League was still around. So Maru from 2013 to 2015, his entire run from that period, where like he has like an insanely high peak, where he's generally getting to the semifinals of almost everything he's playing in. And during that period, I think the reason you give the nod to Maru as the best micro player is the fact that in terms of unit compositions, he can play with everything. He's played with mech and played aggressively too. He played with bio. He played with bio mech. There are times he played just pure air Terran, and his banshees were a fucking menace. And they're part of the reason as to why he killed Innovation was because of his banshee play, and that's how he got to his OSL finals and then eventually won. So just in terms of the amount of units he can micro and then the type of unit compositions, he's by far the best Terran. On top of that, he had this like funny trick in in PVT, where back then charge lots didn't have that weird like AOE thing. But what would happen is they would target onto his Marines, and he'd figure out which Marine it was, and then he'd shift it to the back. And then the reason he shifted to the back is because the charge lots locked them to that Marine, so they had to hit him before they uncharge. And this gave Maru extra time to deal DPS and kill the zealots. And that's how he was so fucking amazing at that Terran versus Protoss. And this is also a player who basically created Marine Medevac mines, Marauders against Protoss before the mines were buffed against Protoss players. So he was the only one doing it. He was surprisingly effective with it, and he was winning with it. So obviously this became a standard after it was buffed, but Maru was doing it before it was buffed, and he was good. He did it after he was buffed. He was fucking amazing. So I give the nod for TVP micro to Maru again. And then for TVZ, I think this one's a bit more complicated because a lot of people think it's about like stutter stepping and splitting. And in that sense, I think Dream is better than Maru is. But in terms of like burrow unburrow micro, I think for mines, I think Maru was better than Dream, whereas Dream was better with like the Thor medevac plays for Zerg versus Terran. So it's a bit of a toss up there, but just overall, I think Maru has been a better micro player than Dream, and that's why you give him the nod for best Terran micro player. And one of the two guys, I think, legitimately, you could say this guy's entire career was based off of his ability to micro the shit out of things. And the second player on this list of two is actually the guy who was Maru's demon. It's Parting. And Parting is he's a player I think underachieved, I guess. That's how I put it. He's a player who had everything I think you'd want in a Protoss player. He had the best micro, obviously. He had surprisingly great macro, despite the fact that his micro was his strong suit. He had very strong all-ins. He had a variety of builds he could use. He had no particular weak matchup. He was pretty good in all three, even though like his PVZ relied much more heavily on his all-ins compared to the other two. And the reason Parting was amazing was, I'd say he has the best Warp Prism micro of anybody we've ever seen. And this is obviously an affront to old hero fans, but Parting is a player who consistently got the most out of his Warp Prism micro, especially with Immortals or Blink Stalkers, than anybody else in the game. His Link Stalkers, that's arguable as to whether or not he was the best. I think he was. Just because the other guy you would put up there would be like Hero, formerly of CJ. But the difference between the two of them is I feel like Parting understood when to go in and when to go out, whereas Hero only knew how to go in and he only kept going in. And so that's the difference between the two of them. On the Blink Stalker, in terms of like high Templar play against Terrans, he was by far the best. There isn't anybody even comparable to him. Like he's the guy who knew how to set up traps for the High Templars, and that's how he beat like Flash in the famous Group of Death in 2013. And obviously, this is a guy who's conducted the Soul Train, and I think, in my personal view, he was the best PvZ player of 2012 because, obviously, you don't play against Broodlord Infestor in the late game. You just fucking kill them before they get there. That's how you win against Zerg back then. So, overall, I'd have to say, between the two of them, I have to give the nod to Parting as the greatest of all time micro player. And there's a few reasons for this. First, I think the Protoss units he was playing with were much harder to deal with. The Blink Stalkers as compared to like Stim and Stutter Stepping. And the fact that relative to the two of them and compared to their compatriots, I suppose, Parting was way better at micro compared to the other Protoss players, whereas like Maru was like very great at micro, but like there was like some comparable guys to him. So I give the nod to Parting, and the biggest reason why I give the nod to Parting is because he's the only guy I've seen in Protoss who has consistently made comebacks off of his pure micro alone, usually off of Blink Stalkers, but sometimes Force Fields, sometimes Immortals, and that's why I think Parting is the best micro player we've ever seen in StarCraft 2 history, and it's too bad he still isn't playing today. All right, see you later.